During the past year, I bought a relatively new hybrid fish called the Polar Blue Parrot Cichlid. Keep watching as I discuss how my experience matches up to the limited amount of information that can be found online. Hi there, it's Connor. Welcome to my channel. I posted a recent video showing the growth of my Polar Blue Parrots over the last 6 months. One of my reasons for getting them is they're relatively new, and I found it interesting to try to keep a fish where there's limited people who have done that in the past. After that last video, there was a number of good questions related to aggression, size, etc. And a lot of the profiles I found online tend to just be copies of blood parrots, which aren't exactly true. There is some differences, especially in size, and I've even found aggression, but there was a bunch of good questions, so I figured it was a good time to just make this video now, share my experience, and hopefully give people a deeper look into what I've experienced keeping these new hybrid fish. So the first thing I want to go through and discuss is growth and size. So now this, I would say, is the most inaccurate stat that you'll find online, because most profiles are just copies from blood parrot profiles, and while a lot of the stuff is in common between them, like behavior and such, and foods and feeding, the size is different. Blood parrots will get to about 8 inches maximum, and you'll see that on a lot of polar parrot profiles you find online, which isn't true. From reading a lot of forums, some people had experiences before I bought them. The general consensus was they'll get to about 3 to 4 inches. And then mine right now are just about 3 inches, I'd say. And I would say they've even probably over the last 2 months really kind of have almost stopped growing. So they did actually grow. I got them when they were less than an inch, probably like 3/4 of an inch. They were like super, super tiny. They were super cute. There's 2 of them in the tank. That's why I ended up getting them, although I was really curious before that. And in 5 months, they got to about the 3-inch mark. So they grew very quick for some of the fish I've had, although they don't get very big. So, I mean, it's not like they're still only probably growing maybe like a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch a month, but they get to that 3-inch mark very quick, at least from my experience. And I will say, though, that they have been one of the fish that have grown to be one of the most impressive looks from me not really knowing what to expect. They came very tiny, and as they got older, they colored up really nicely. They have some really nice blue on them. And then my male, I think I have a male and a female, but there's one that's definitely a male. He has a very nice neutral hump on his head, which is very cool. And then his tail has some very nice red in it. And I've also seen online ones that have yellow in their tail. So I guess that maybe even with breeding them slightly different, you can get other colors in there. So that's something to look out for. Now, next, also related to the size you get to, is the tank size you want to keep them in. I'm keeping my 2 in a 65, and then they're with a couple of other different, they're with blood parrots and angelfish, and then a bunch of bottom dwellers. But for a minimum for them, I would recommend 20 gallons for a pair as the minimum, and that would be pretty much you're just keeping them in the tank. Maybe like some smaller bottom dwellers, like some quarries or something, but that is what I'd recommend. And I think a 20 gallon for 2 of them would probably be fine as long as they get along. I think 29 gallons for a pair is much, much better, especially if you want to keep any other fish. And obviously, if you want a community, you'll want even more. But I would say, yeah, don't put 2 and anything less than a 20, and then a 29 is even better. And this kind of comes from, they are very active fish. They love to swim around and be active, and they can be a little bit aggressive. They are a semi-aggressive fish, like kind of any cichlid, but I would say, from my experience, they are more aggressive than blood parrots, and a lot of other people online have said that as well. But yeah, the jump into aggression, as I've spent a lot of time just reading forums and people's experiences before I got mine, a lot of people have said they have been pretty aggressive, and it's one thing to watch out for. With blood parrots, one of the things is their mouths, they can't really open and close them, so even if blood parrots are aggressive, they usually don't do too much damage. These ones, when they eat, it looks like their mouths almost do operate fully. They're not quite like blood parrots in that way, so I imagine they could do some damage if they wanted to. What I have noticed, though, when I first got them, I had put them in a pseudo quarantine tank, but there was with some mollies, and they were smaller mollies, but they were honestly just about the size of the polar parrots when I had put them in there, because the polar parrots are so small. But the polar parrots were super aggressive towards those mollies. I actually was going to keep them in there for like a month or so, a little bit more to quarantine, and after like a week, I felt like I had to remove them because they were just chasing the mollies like crazy. Now, it was only a 10-gallon, but the polar parrots were so small that I think still that was fine to quarantine them in back then. But yeah, they were very aggressive towards the mollies. Also, when I had first put them in this tank, my angelfish were a bit smaller, and they were pretty aggressive towards the angelfish at first. They weren't really trying to injure them, but if the angelfish went near them, they would chase them away. Once the angelfish like ran away, they wouldn't constantly badger them, so it wasn't like aggressive to where they were really trying to injure them. And I guess it's the same thing with the mollies, but they would chase them very, very frequently. So it's kind of what I noticed. Now, in the tank they're in now, they get along with everybody completely fine. Even the angelfish, they don't bother them anymore. They get along totally well with the blood parrots, and any bottom dwellers that I've ever been with have been totally fine. So that's basically just clown loaches, yo-yo loaches, and corydoras. But that's kind of my experience. And a lot of other people have said they've been very aggressive. What I'll say is if you're putting them with other parrotfish or other kind of robust cichlids, then you shouldn't have any problems. But any smaller fish, the general community fish, peaceful fish, you know, like I said, mollies, basically any live bears, any tetras, you know, maybe barbs or something like that, I would be careful with that. You know, I think you could try it, because it probably definitely depends on the fish, but just be prepared if you're thinking of that. You might have to separate them in the future. And in general, I would say they're not really the best fish probably for the general community. It has to be more of a semi-aggressive other fish that can handle their own. And then as far as aggression between each other, when I had got them, the male that I have, did harass the other one, who I think is a female, but a lot. Now that they've gotten older, that's totally kind of died down. And I had the same behavior between my blood parrots too when they were younger. So I'll just notice that. But the one did kind of bully the other one a lot when they were younger, and the one wasn't hiding a lot just because of that. So they can be aggressive towards each other. I'd say also maybe, you know, having more than just two probably is best, whether it's 3 or, you know, even 5 is probably better to split up the aggression. But you might notice that. But mine did as they got older. They're totally peaceful now, and they're just kind of buddies. So that was kind of just what I experienced. Now for foods, they will follow pretty much as a common omnivore diet. Basically, their foods are going to be exactly the same as blood parrots, just they don't get as big. So maybe some of the larger cichlid pellets that you might give blood parrots when they're older, that we wouldn't be able to give them. But otherwise, the same food for blood parrots, angelfish, you know, all kind of going to be the same. Some of the foods that I have really enjoyed is there's one, Hikari Blood Parrot Plus. They really, really like this, and it floats at the top. It's super easy for them to eat. And it's supposedly very good for color, and my polar parrots have colored up very, very nicely. Otherwise, when they're younger, I have these small, they're actually sinking cichlid pellets. They're also for color, but these ones are much smaller than the Blood Parrot Plus. So when they're younger, a pellet like this might be better, just because they do start pretty young, and still they like these pellets, and they're a good food to alternate that I switch. And another one that I just love for almost all fish is Hikari Vibrobites, also good for color. I think everything, a lot of foods I feed are very good for color supposedly, but they also love these, and they're a good size to where, you know, when they're adults, they'll be able to eat these very easily. And then besides that, I also like to feed it treats of frozen bloodworms, you know, a couple times a week. And then just normal freeze-dried bloodworms are great. I obviously put a flake in there to just kind of vary it up. So they'll be good with all of those. So I just say nice varied diet, but having some cichlid pellet specifically for them is also going to do very well for them. Now for water parameters, since they are so new, pretty much all the profiles are the same as blood parrots, but generally most kind of South Central American cichlids have similar parameters, so I'm going to assume that's pretty accurate. Looking online and getting the best information I could, the parameters I found was a pH of 6.5 to 8.0, a temperature of 72 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and a general hardness of between 2 to 25 degrees. Now for my parameters that I've kept them at 80 degrees, the upper end of that range, and that's mostly because I have clown loaches and they like warmer temperatures, so I kind of have put it as warm as I can for the clown loaches, but where everyone else is comfortable. But they have been completely good and fine staying at 80 degrees. For pH, it's always been right around 7.4, and then right between like 10 to 14 degrees hardness, probably closest to 12 most of the time. And they've seemed totally healthy with those parameters. So I'd say anywhere kind of in there. Obviously stability is key, and you just want stuff to be stable, but they have pretty general parameters to where most people can probably have the water around that for a general community. I do have a website. If you want to ever just have a quick sheet of all these stats and stuff, I have a website I'll link below that I made where I have stats for all sorts of hundreds of freshwater fish. And I did put what I found, the best information I collected for polar parrots on there if you ever want a quick reference for them. And just last, now I want to talk about if you're thinking about getting polar parrots, what you should consider and kind of my opinion on it. And my thoughts from having them now for 7 or so months. The first thing to consider, I think, is depending what tank you're going to put them in. Obviously, for the general community, I don't think they're going to be a good fit. I think they're going to harass a lot of other fish, smaller fish, more peaceful fish. If you have a cichlid tank with robust cichlids, I think they'll be great. They're smaller fish, so they're not going to take up too much size, but they can hold their own against fish. And I generally find that like the angelfish and my blood parrots don't even try to bother them at all. So that's a kind of tank that I think would be ideal for them. Also, if you want a cichlid, but you don't want one that's like larger, I think they can be a good option. Actually, the male that I have with his neutral hump, I almost kind of look at him as like, I guess he doesn't quite have the neutral hump of a flower horn, but you could kind of look at him as like a mini flower horn. Like if you liked flower horns, but you couldn't have a large tank, you know, you could put just him in like a 20-gallon and he could almost act like, you know, a flower horn. But he has very cool colors and stuff, and the neutral hump looks very cool. But then overall, the other thing is they just have a lot of personality. They're very happy. They're always coming up to the glass when I'm here, always very active, and they'll kind of chase each other around and interact with other fish. So if you like a fish with personality, they're a great choice for that. They have the typical fun cichlid personality, but they're much, much smaller. So that's definitely a great thing. And they just have a very fun look to them. And with how the shape turned out and the colors turned out, I'm very happy. They look cooler than I expected when I got them. So I'm very happy with my choice to have them and keep them. But that's kind of just what my experience was and what to consider if you're going to get them. So thanks for checking out the video. I'd love to hear others' experience on polar parrots if you've ever kept them, or if you have any additional questions, feel free to ask them in the comments and I'd be happy to respond. If you could give the video a quick like, it helps out my channel and this video and helps other people find it. But anyways, I'll catch everyone in the next video.